Well, TFCon was great. Unfortunately, I guess I caught a little bit of that con flu and couldn't make any videos for a few days. I'm actually still recovering, but I am feeling a little bit better, and there's lots of news to go through now that we're in the middle of San Diego Comic-Con. First, let's start with the one that everybody's talking about. The one that debuted online before SDCC. In fact, it debuted the day after TFCon. Kind of weird timing. Maybe even a little bit suspicious. Yes, I am of course talking about HasLab's first Transformers crowdfunding project, Transformers War for Cybertron Unicron.
Marvelous! Look! It's Unicron!
At over 27 inches tall in robot mode, this is the largest Transformers toy to date. He features more than 50 points of articulation, including what we see in this video, what looks like individual finger joints. In planet mode, they say he's 30 inches in diameter, which I'm guessing includes the ring. Kind of funny how he's technically bigger in planet mode than robot. Also, he has this really cool mouth opening and closing gimmick where you spin the ring around his mouth and it makes all his little teeth mandible things open and close at once. On the website it says he has movable eyes, so I guess that means you can have him stare in different directions. Personally, I would have preferred removable eyes. That way you could recreate how he looks at the end of Transformers the movie, where the Autobots cross the Quintesson ship through his one eye and then drive out through the other. Although who knows, maybe that's what they mean. Or maybe if you rotate them a certain way, there's a part of them that recreates that broken look. Oh, and it also says that he has an articulated mouth and movable teeth? Ew. I don't know why you'd want movable teeth. Normally that's a bad thing. If you look closely at his mouth, you can see some kind of cylinder behind his lower teeth. Maybe that has something to do with it? But I'm still confused why you'd want movable teeth in robot mode. He also comes with a stand, which is awesome because the previous toy didn't. So no lying on his back in planet mode for this Unicron.
And nothing.
I think that's about it for almost all the details we have on this so far, other than the most important ones. The ones that have the fandom in an uproar. First off, Hasbro is asking $574.99, or basically $575 for this monster of a toy. And that only includes shipping within the US. They do ship to Canada, but that will require additional shipping costs. Not to mention the custom charges once it gets across the border. Plus, you gotta remember that's American dollars. Converting to Canadian, that's over $750. And if you live outside the US or Canada, you can forget it, because Hasbro isn't offering this toy internationally. But maybe don't get too worked up just yet. More on that in a minute. Hasbro's also asking for 8,000 backers for this toy to even get made. So when you crunch the numbers, that's $4.6 million that Hasbro is asking for. At the time of making this video, this crowdfunding project has been up for a little more than 3 days, with only about 1,400 backers signed up so far. Now you may look at this as hopeful. Oh okay, so 1,400 backers in 3 days out of 8,000. That means that this project was 17.5 backed in 3 days. So if that trend continues, then it should be fully backed in another 17 or 18 days, right? No problem then. Heck, by that logic, it should be backed twice over by the time the countdown is done. Which, by the way, is the third thing. Since this is a crowdfunding project, you only have until August 31st, 2019 at 11:59 p.m. to get your pre-orders in and back this project. Actually, that's 1 minute to midnight, but you get the idea. And that's the thing, if this project doesn't get 8,000 backers, then you can forget about getting this awesome toy.
Proceed on your way to oblivion.
Or so we thought. Again, more details on that in a moment. Now, honestly, I don't think this thing will get fully backed. I mean, we just did the math that said it should easily be, but realistically, I believe most people who are going to back this will have already done so by now. To me, I see there being 3 different types of Transformers fans when it comes to this Unicron. There's the fans who can afford it and don't think twice about putting down the money.
You belong to me, no.
Then there's the fans who know they can't be spending $575 on a toy and have resigned themselves to being unable to afford it.
I belong to nobody!
And finally, there's the ones in the middle, the fans who want it, but are going to have a really hard time working this huge $575 bite out of their budget.
Your bargaining posture is highly dubious.
I mean, $575. How many Siege toys can you buy with that? How many Masterpiece figures can you buy with that? How many third-party figures can you buy with that? So if you are one of those fans who are on the fence about this, you really have to ask yourself, is this Unicron worth missing out on some of those Siege or Masterpiece or third-party figures for? It's like, maybe you don't buy that third version of Masterpiece Optimus Prime, MP44. He's $450. That's most of the cost of this Unicron right there. So maybe you pre-order Unicron now and wait to pick up Optimus later. Or maybe you don't get that third-party combiner that you had your eye on. Or maybe you go the other way and say, hey, I have all these figures that I don't really want anymore. Maybe I should just sell them. And that's how you afford this new Unicron. Maybe you haven't looked at them or touched them in months. Maybe they've been in a storage bin for a year.
Jettison some weight, or I'll never make it to Cybertron!
Again, it's kind of funny how this came out literally hours after TFCon ended. Because I can bet you if this was before TFCon, people would have been a lot tighter with their wallets than they were at the show. And I bet there would have been a lot more room sales of people trying to sell off their excess figures to pay for this Unicron. Now, getting back to the point I touched on earlier, I have my doubts that this project will be fully backed by the time it ends. Because I think anyone who has the money will have already backed it by now. The only holdouts are the fans I mentioned earlier. Since this is SDCC weekend, we might see a surge there. But if the hardcore fans aren't behind this, the Comic-Con casuals aren't going to be making up much of a difference. I'm not trying to be negative. I obviously hope that this thing gets made and that everybody can enjoy it. I just don't want to get my hopes up. But worry not. As it turns out, Takara has come to the rescue, as they have announced that they will be releasing this Unicron figure as a Takara Tomy Mall exclusive, seemingly untied to whether this HasLab project is fully funded or not. So that means that more people outside the US or Canada will have an easier time trying to get this that way, rather than having to middleman the Hasbro one through someone in North America. That said, if you are in the US or Canada, HasLab is still probably the easiest and cheapest way to go for you to get this, assuming it gets funded, of course. But more importantly, that means that even if this HasLab project isn't funded, everyone will still have the opportunity to buy this monster of a toy, even if you do have to import it. But at least it won't be like so many other Unicron toys, and only something you'll see in a Hasbro display cabinet at a BotCon or HasCon or whatever the next official convention will be. And after all that, what are my opinions on it? I think he looks fantastic. The colors really pop on him, and he's definitely a large improvement over the Takara 2010 or the Platinum Edition remolds of the old Armada toy. My only major gripe is all the panels. This guy is just covered in panels in robot mode, all either hiding behind his back or behind or on the side of his lower legs. So he's got this huge backpack and very kibbly legs, which is probably why they included a stand, so that he can stay upright in not just planet mode, but robot mode too. That said, I still haven't pre-ordered one because I am concerned about the price. Not to mention the shipping to Canada, and then the likely customs and taxes and duties and whatever other made-up charges they think up at the border. I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if this cost me close to $1,000 Canadian once it's all said and done. Going to TFCon, I was ready to throw down cash for Masterpiece Beast Wars Megatron, Dinobot, Perfect Effects version of Cryotech, and even Zhang Jing's version of Transmetal 2 Megatron, which I didn't realize wasn't actually out yet. But in the end, I didn't buy any of those, mainly because I was concerned that I'd be blowing too much money on 2 or 3 or 4 figures. Whereas now, I'm asking myself, do I really want to spend the same amount on one figure? It's a tough choice. When making these types of toy purchasing decisions, I always try and compare how much enjoyment I'm going to get out of this toy versus how much enjoyment I'm going to get out of something similarly priced. Usually, for me, that's something like a regular retail toy versus a video game. But this is more like this Unicron versus a whole new console. I mean, this figure won't even be released until 2021. By then we'll have the PlayStation 5 and whatever the final name of the Xbox Scarlet is. You know, you can probably buy a whole next-gen console for the price of this Unicron. On the other hand, video games and consoles are always easier to get and always come down in price, with a few exceptions. But in general, you can almost always wait and pick up a game or a console down the line, and you'll have saved yourself some money. And while the same is usually true for Transformers, this is the exception to the rule. Even with Takara releasing this big boy too, this is still something that's going to be rare, and you'd be better off getting in and pre-ordering now rather than waiting and hoping to find one cheaper later. Cause let's face it, at $575, you better be damn sure you want this big mofo. And if it lives up to expectation, I don't see many people regretting their purchases. The only people I see trying to resell this is either those unfortunate enough to have something bad happen in their life and need money and have to get rid of not just Unicron, but most if not all of their collection. Or I can see some people who are foolish enough to try and flip this and try and sell it at double the price. Which again, I think with this being such a high priced and limited item to start with, it doesn't make much sense for people to wait and try and get it later when it'll obviously be more expensive. Just look at things like certain BotCon sets or figures. There's a reason why BotCon 2006 Megatron goes for crazy stupid money, because most people who already own it are huge fans and would never part with it unless they were in the most extreme of circumstances. And I have a feeling that this Unicron will be somewhat along those lines. In the end, my advice is that if you can afford it, get it. This is one of those figures that every collector should own. You won't regret it. Unless of course you really can't afford it. Then just admire it from afar, but still keep your eyes peeled in case any unfortunate soul needs to part with theirs for cheap. Anyways, that's all the news I have on this colossal figure. Let me know down in the comments if you've already pre-ordered yours, if you're debating whether to get a second mortgage to pay for this guy, or if you've resigned yourself to not being able to afford him. If it's the last one, hey, look on the bright side. At least there should be a lot of Takara 2010 and Platinum Edition Unicron selling for cheap now. That's not a bad stand-in if you don't already own one. And as always, don't forget to like, subscribe, share, ring the bell, all that fun stuff. And I'll see you back here for more San Diego Comic-Con Transformers news.